Hello everyone, I'm Dave Apsley. I'm a forester and a natural resources specialist with Ohio State University Extension. Today I'm joining you from my woodland here in Jackson County, Ohio, and I'd like to introduce you to the HealthyWoods app. Normally I would do this on my phone, but I'm doing the video recording with my phone, so I've downloaded the app onto an iPad, and I'd just like to walk you through an assessment to show you how the process works. So I've downloaded the HealthyWoods app, and now I'm at the point where it asks me to start a new assessment. So I'm going to click that button, and then I'm going to work myself through a series of questions. The first question is, what kind of woods am I looking at? And there's some major broad categories. The first one's an aging harvested stand, a freshly harvested stand, a sapling or pole timber stand, which means trees that are probably under about 6 inches or so in diameter. And then finally a saw timber stand, which is a stand of trees or a grouping of trees that are all about the same as far as the species mix and size and soil conditions, that are about 12 inches in diameter or larger. So in general, when I purchased this property, these trees weren't quite that big, but it's been 20 years ago, and most of the trees now are in that 12-inch size class or a bit larger. There are a few residual trees like the big black oak in the background that are much larger, that live through a heavy grazing period. I've got large black oak, large scarlet oak, and a large white oak over here. They lived through that intensive grazing period, so the canopy was never totally lost. And then after the grazing stopped, this younger stand came in the early 50s. So I'm going to classify this as a saw timber stand and get started. So the first question it asks, and I fortunately get to answer no to this, is, did you recently experience a major weather event, like a hurricane, ice storm, tornado, or flooding? Fortunately, we've missed the 2 major ice storms that hit areas just south of us. One occurred just about a month ago. The other one occurred in 2003, I believe it was. So we missed that damage, not a lot of damage from ice. We also, I believe it was 2010, the derecho event that came through, did some damage to this property, but this stand was not damaged greatly. Some of the larger trees that were left from that previous period of grazing did go down in that storm. So I'm going to answer no to that one and move on. The next question asks about my goals and objectives, and I'm one of those persons that likes to have their cake and eat it too. So my main reason for owning a property is for recreation, a place to live, a place to raise a family, and tied to that is legacy. I'd love to pass this on to my 3 adult children and their heirs so they have some place to come and enjoy time in the woods. I also like to hunt, so I'm going to click wildlife and timber. We've also got foraging, investment, and undecided as options, but I think 4 options pretty well describes my reasons for owning the property. The next thing it asks me to do is look up at the trees in the canopy to see if the canopy's closed. Now we're in later part of March, so the leaves aren't on and the canopy does appear a bit open. We're also in a part of my woods where I've done a little work. You can see some chainsaw work on this smaller tree here. I girdled this tree probably 10 years ago to make room for larger canopies. So I've got some small canopy gaps, but in general, the canopy is fairly closed. So we're going to pick on the closed option. We're going to select it, and then we're going to hit done. And that's to take a picture. So you can actually upload a photo that you've previously taken, or you can take a shot up into the canopy, and it'll add this to the report that you can then share with foresters who can help you with it. So you can add multiple pictures at that point. Do I see dieback or dead branches on larger trees? When I look up in this canopy, again, most of these trees are oak. We've got a lot of black oak scattered around, a little bit of white oak in the background, but their canopies look generally healthy. So I'm going to say no. And what you want to look for is small branches. If you've got small twigs out to the tips, you're fine. If the branches are larger and there's not fine branching beyond that, that means you've had some dieback. So I'm going to hit next. Do you see many dead trees in your stand? I did mention that there's a few trees that are down. I'm seeing a larger dead black oak over here that was part of that earlier generation that survived that heavy grazing period, and I've lost a handful of those over the years, but there's a big dead stem there. But other than that, I'm going to answer, my choices are many large dead trees, Let's see, yes, many large dead trees. Yes, many dead small trees. There are a few scattered dead trees. I'm going to say a few scattered dead trees, including this one that I've girdled to kill. And then it asks for lots of other things that we're looking for. Things like insect damage or sapsucker damage, which is a woodpecker. If we're seeing large holes from boring insects. So for instance, if we had Asian longhorn beetle, which fortunately we don't have in this part of the state, we're looking for cankers or unusual growths. There are also pictures of foliage damage, but obviously at this time of the year, you cannot answer that. So I'm going to not select any of those. I'm going to hit next. And now it asks for, of the tall trees in the canopy, select those that you're seeing. You've got lots of line drawings of leaves. Again, the foliage is not out right now, but I'm going to pick the ones that I see on the property. I'm going to select white oak because I know we have that. We also have a bit of red maple in the canopy. Not a lot, but there are a few red maples in the canopy. So I'm going to select that. And then finally, I'm going to select the red oak group, which includes northern red oak, black oak, scarlet oak, and a few others. But those would be the main ones to look for. You hit next. We've got lots of other pictures to choose from, but I've already selected my 3. And then I can move on to the next question. Take a picture or 2 of the most dominant species. So I'm going to get a shot with some of these black oaks in it. And then I'm going to turn around and zoom into this white oak a little bit and get a shot of that. Click done. Hit next. Do you have a heavy vine presence? I'm looking through this woods and I don't see a lot of vines. There is a valley that I'm looking down off to my right. There are a few grapevines down there. Shortly after I purchased this property, I made an attempt to go out and remove many of the grapevines. There weren't a lot of them, but there were some growing on some valuable trees, so I did remove many of them, but I left a few. I do see a clinging vine on this tree over to my left, which looks like from here a Virginia creeper, which is not one I'm too concerned about. Mainly looking for grapevines and possibly some of the non-native invasive vines, like the bittersweet, the non-native bittersweet. So I'm going to say no. Click next. Invasive tree species. 2 main invasive tree species that we'll find in this part of Ohio are tree of heaven or ailanthus and occasionally paulownia, and I'm not seeing either one of those. And then it asks, does a single species dominate the shrubby layer? And I'm looking around and I see a lot of variety. I see this is also called musclewood or blue beech, East American hornbeam. I'm seeing some small, actually, I didn't notice this, but this looks like a serviceberry growing right here. So that's cool, it's a small tree. More of the ironwood, some small hickory. Over here, I've got some shrubby things, mostly greenbrier with a little Japanese honeysuckle growing in here, not heavy. Here's an ash that's not doing too well, but a small ash. So I can say no, we don't have one single dominant species. Normally we ask that question because when you have single dominant species, they tend to be non-native invasives. So I'm going to say no. And then it asks about ground level vegetation, and it gives some examples of some non-native invasive and in some cases native species that can become very aggressive. And I do have Japanese stilt grass on this property. I've been working hard to control it, but I have not seen it in this section of the woods, so I'm not selecting any here. It says take a picture of the ground vegetation. Again, there's not a lot to take a picture of here, but I'm going to get a shot of this greenbrier as an example. I'm going to say done. We're moving on to the next question. Layers in the seedling layer, or species in the seedling layer. Probably the one I'm seeing the most of is red maple. I don't see much in the way of ash. I did just see one. And I think that probably does it. So we're going to hit done here. And sometimes you got to scroll around on the screen to find where the next or the done button is. Is there a visible browse line? What tells me there's not a heavy deer presence in here is because we've got greenbrier down here. Now you can see where they browsed it because they love it. It's green, it's pretty nutritious for them. But in general, there is some vegetation below, about 5 feet or so is where the browse line usually occurs. Here in Ohio, we probably average about 15 to 20 deer per square mile in southeastern Ohio where I am. And that's usually not enough to have a browse line. But occasionally you'll go into urban fringe areas and you'll see a browse line where the deer densities are so high that they're really making an impact in the understory. And in that case, they're often favoring the non-native invasive shrubby species. Am I planning a harvest soon? The answer is no. These trees are just getting, into that 12 to 15 inch class. The larger trees that are left have very little value, or they would have been harvested by previous landowners. So I'm going to say no. And then I can name this assessment. I'm going to go ahead and call this oak space stand. And again, a stand of trees is a grouping of trees where you've got about the same mix, the same past land use history. And when you do an assessment like this, you don't necessarily have to do it on a plot. You want to do it for a little bit larger area and kind of assess an area that's an acre or more in size, but work your way through and kind of give those average numbers. So after I've done that, I get a thank you. You've completed the assessment, and ask me to upload. I'm standing a quarter mile from my house. I don't have an internet connection, and I don't have a cell service with this iPad, so I'm going to have to hit later. And when I get back in, I will share that assessment with you. I'll do some screenshots. I'll capture a little more footage on this site, and we'll share that with you. So thank you. Please take part of your day to enjoy it in the woods. And this is the Tri-State Conference with Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So to be optimistic this time of year, before we played our first game, I'm wearing a Reds hat to support that. I actually grew up in southeastern Indiana, and I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. So thank you, and have a great day.